All right, we are back with another installment of Accepting the Challenges. Here on Accepting the Challenges, if this is your first time checking us out, what we want to do is put a spotlight, put a shine, and really give some love to the educators around the world and allow their story to be told, allow their journey to be told, and also for them to share some insight or experience into some things and how they've learned and what they've learned in those things. So, and I totally messed up, and I should have asked how to pronounce your last name. So I'm not even gonna attempt it.
That's okay. My last name is Beckendorf-Edou, like without any further ado.
All right, So we have Dr. Tracey Beckendorf-Edou. So I'm gonna call you Dr. Tracey because it'll be a tongue twister for me if that's okay. Um, Can you share a little bit about who you are and what you currently do in your current role right now?
I am the superintendent of Cascade School District in Washington State. Cascade School District is a rural district. We go from the top of the Cascade Mountains at the Stevens Pass for those who know Washington State, and we go all the way down the eastern side of the mountain to the orchards at the base. Then we go all the way up another mountain to what we call Blewett Pass. So we're very large geographically, a mountainous rural area in eastern Washington.
Awesome, awesome. And how long have you been there?
This is my second year here.
Awesome.
But my family has roots in the area. So my great grandparents moved to this area in 1904.
Wow.
My dad actually graduated from high school, what we call down valley, so down
Yep.
down the mountains to the bottom in Wenatchee School District. So I have deep roots in the area, but I myself just moved here just over a year ago. It's my second year.
Awesome, awesome. Now, where are you from originally?
Well, I'm from Washington State originally, but my dad was a minister, so we moved around a lot. So we were in a lot of different rural areas. I kind of count myself as having grown up on the west side in the Olympic Peninsula
Yep.
area, kind of in a farming community, also rural, is kind of where I count because that's where I spent first to fifth grade. But I consider myself a Washingtonian. But before I came to Cascade School District, I'd been in Tennessee for the 9 years previous to that, in Washington, D.C. the year prior. So I have been out of my home state for a little while before I came back.
You enjoy the mountains and the valleys and those things because I see where you were in Tennessee. You were in the you were in the mountains.
Yeah, not far from the mountains in Tennessee, East Tennessee, Oak Ridge, Tennessee,
Yep.
is where I was living before I moved here.
Awesome, awesome. So let's go back. Let's go back to your journey. Long before you were Dr. Beckendorf-Edou, and you were just Tracy. You were
Yep.
Tracy, and you were going back. Tell us a little bit about your journey through life as a kid, and kind of how that ended up leading you into education.
Well, that's a really good question and probably can take the entire podcast.
That's okay. We'll take whatever we can.
um, so, like I said, I grew up as what we call a PK, a preacher's kid, in kind of a blended family. So, there were five of us in that family, and I have another half brother. So, I have four brothers and one sister. But we grew up in a household with the five of us, and I was the oldest. And I was really good in school, and people kind of always said, "You're going to be a teacher." So I did a lot of helping other kids and stuff. But I think it's important to understand that my siblings I mean, we're all over the map academically. So although I was a good student, I can't say that about all my siblings. We were all just really, really different.
Hmm.
And I think that having brothers and sisters who might have been struggling in different areas or might have been strong in areas that I wasn't, like athletics, was just really good. Give me that kind of diversity of just understanding different perspectives about how things go in school. Just watching my brothers and sisters and myself. So I kind of grew up always being told, "You're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a teacher." And I was extremely resistant to the idea. Like, no, I will not be a teacher, will not be a teacher. Oh, you need me to tutor somebody? Okay, I'll do that. But no, I'm not going to be a teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
I was very resistant to the idea. It's funny now because I think back and I'm like, whenever you have strong feelings about something one way or the other, there's probably an indication of
Sure.
passion. And, they say the line between love and hate is very small.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I was resistant. And
Well,
then I
was
went,
there, I don't mean to interrupt you, but was there a career that you maybe had already set in your mind that I'm not going to be a teacher, I'm going to be this, or there's just something about teaching that I just can't stand?
I think it's because in my family history, it's like all the men were engineers and all the women were teachers. And other than, my dad was a pastor, but he was also had a bachelor's degree in engineering.
Okay.
So I just felt like going into teaching would have just been so typical. And I didn't want to be typical. I wanted to do something different. And
A
I
little
felt like
rebellious.
I was a little rebellious. That might be a good
Okay.
word.
Yeah.
So then I went to college in Whittier College in California, which is a Quaker school. Um, and I ended up being a math major and a chemistry minor. And I had another kind of set of courses that kind of gave me the equivalent to a minor in biology. So, very strong STEM background.
Hmm.
And again, there was a lot of kind of push like, hey, you should be a teacher. And I was like, no, I'm going to go be a scientist. I'm going to do mathematical modeling of various ecological areas. I was really interested in being a scientist actually, but I have itchy feet and my dad has itchy feet and my different family ancestors have itchy feet, and I really wanted to travel, but we didn't have money. I was a scholarship kid. We grew up, we didn't have a lot of money at all, and I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world, and I didn't really know how to do that. And I had some friends who actually joined the Peace Corps, and I started getting these letters with these airmail envelopes. If you remember the airmail
Yeah. Yeah.
envelopes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, oh man, I wanna do that. I want to go somewhere in the world. Like before I become a scientist, maybe I could go see the world a little bit. And I went to the Peace Corps office in Los Angeles. And I was just like, hey, I'm kind of interested in finding out about the Peace Corps. And they were like, oh, here we have a math major walking in our door who took French in high school. You know
Uh,
what? You could go be a math teacher in a French speaking country in Africa. And I was like, all right, I guess I can do that for 2 years. I mean, it's 2 years, right? It's a 2-year commitment. I mean,
sure.
okay, okay. And so that's what I did. I went to Gabon, which is a country in Central Africa. It's kind of where the equator
Hmm.
crosses the west coast of Africa. It's actually considered Central Africa and not West Africa.
Hmm.
And I remember we had to have all of this training. I had to take 6 hours of French a day, and I had to take all this pedagogical training on being a teacher and all this stuff. And it was so hard to go through all of this. And then before they send you out to be a teacher, you have to do like a summer school kind of thing, like a
Hmm.
summer school classroom. And I remember walking into this first day and this first classroom and seeing the students, and in Gabon they all wear uniforms, so here are these students in their uniforms, and the girls with braids in their hair, and walking in and like this dusty chalkboard, and it was like this, like it just clicked for me,
Yeah.
and I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this. And I've been resisting this my whole life. And I just felt that energy you get between the students
Yeah.
and the teacher. There's this flow and this energy and this kind of love and support. And just, when you see a child learn something, I mean, there's just nothing like it. And I just fell in love with it at that time. Just that first day,
That's
the
awesome.
first 10 minutes. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, so you did that for 3 years, right?
Well, I did official Peace Corps for 3 years. That is correct. But I actually lived in Gabon for 10 years.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so I actually stayed after my Peace Corps time, and I stayed in Gabon, and actually my first husband was from Gabon and had a daughter there. So my daughter is half Gabonese, half American.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so I taught over the course of the 10 years, I taught in Gabonese schools, I taught in the French international schools, and then in the American international school system.
Man, that is quite a first introduction into the education world. I'm assuming it was a bit of a culture shock when you got there. Um,
Yeah, it was a huge culture shock when I got there, but Peace Corps is really good at kind of helping you understand some of the cultural differences and do's and don'ts and things to watch out for. So, I can't complain. Like, I had a lot of training. I actually almost think coming back to the US was harder in a sense because, when I came back 10 years later, the marriage hadn't worked out. I brought my daughter back. Now it's like I'm coming back to the US. So I was in Gabon from 1993 to 2003. So if you think of the things that
oh
happened
yeah,
during that time span, 9/11, Seinfeld,
yeah, yeah.
you know, debit cards.
Well, yeah.
Um,
Well, I would say even the different advances in technology between the two countries and different
yeah.
things. Yeah, it's you
And
you you went back in time in some ways, and then you kind of traveled to the future in some ways.
yeah, and some of that is correct and some of that is a perception. Like I would
Hmm.
say that in Gabon, they were ahead of us with cell phones. Like
Oh wow. Okay.
Africa was more on top of cell phones than the
Yes,
US was.
that's true.
So, yeah, because they didn't necessarily have the infrastructure for all the landlines, so they just went cell phones first. So,
Yep.
there are some areas that I think that Africa is more ahead than a lot of Americans know, but you are correct in many ways. And then if you think about when I left Africa, I left as basically a college student and I came back as a mother and a professional,
Sure.
and just trying to figure all of that out was just extremely challenging. So it was really starting all over. And so I came back to Washington State, my home state, of
Hmm.
course,
Yep.
and I was working in a school district in Washington, and actually kind of decided to switch school districts because here my daughter is biracial, and
Sure.
we ended up going to a more diverse area, and that was better for her. And that was Renton School District. And then, there came a point at which I thought, I kind of want to do my doctorate. I forgot to tell you that I did my master's degree in South Africa. So,
Okay.
yeah, the College of New Jersey had an international program. So I would go down to Johannesburg like in the summer and do like online classes during the school year and stuff. So I had my master's degree from an international program from the College of New Jersey. I've actually never set foot on their campus in the US, but I'll tell you, their master's degree program was awesome. I mean, there are
Awesome.
people from all over Africa there. It was really cool. There was nothing like that graduation ceremony in South Africa. Have you ever heard of the South African national anthem?
I well, an ironic thing is I think I have, um, but I'm not going to say yes.
I would
I
say it's one of the most moving national anthems. It's one of those national anthems that makes you just want to climb to the top of a mountain and just like, yes. I mean, it's very moving. It's amazing. And kind of walking down that aisle in your cap and gown to that anthem is next to
awesome.
people from all over the continent
Yeah.
was just incredible. Anyway, sidebar, but so there came a point at which I thought, I want to do my doctorate, and it was a personal choice. I felt like if I didn't, I would always say I could have, and so I did. I decided to join the program at Seattle University, which is a Jesuit university in Seattle, while I was in Renton. And I decided, being the single mom at the time, I was like, let me go ahead and do my administrative certification at the same time, just to have multiple options, because you never know. And I had this kind of idea that I would want to be a professor, but I thought you never know. And let me just go ahead and, get my administrative certification. Well, so I've been teaching for years at
Hmm.
this point, and I love teaching. I just think it's just the most amazing profession. Like I was just talking about that flow you get with kids, and when you see kids, you know, catch on to something, and when you see them grow and strive
Well,
and
I've heard,
achieve.
yeah, I've heard educators almost relate it to like it's almost like a high, like it's like an energy, like you get it
Yeah,
and that clicks, and you're like the hair stands up on your arms, and you're like, and the kid doesn't know it, right? The kid doesn't know that that happened, but internally you're like, he got it or she got it, and I love it.
yeah, it's just there's just nothing like it. And I mean, it's just incredible. So I always love teaching, and even to this day, I miss that, on a daily basis. But I was doing my admin program, and I started thinking about or learning about organizational structure and how you can work as an organization and as a team in order to create systems and structures that support kids. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so I really learned like, wow, I really am interested in administration and thinking about those behind the scenes things that maybe nobody even notices or knows about, but that make an impact on kids in a systemic way. And so that's what kind of led me in administration. Then when I was in Renton, I became a math coach. So I was like, I was like, led professional development for math teachers, and I got a lot of training myself on leading professional development. And then I got this great opportunity. It's called the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship, and it's for STEM educators across the country. They take one cohort like every year, and y'all go to Washington, D.C., and you work in a national agency and you learn about their STEM education programs, but you also help them understand how what they're doing impacts people on the ground. And I got the opportunity to work in Washington, D.C. with the Department of Energy, whom before the Einstein Fellowship, I didn't actually realize the Department of Energy had STEM education programs.
Hmm.
But there are so many resources out there at the national level that I just don't think people necessarily know about. And anyway, went to this cohort, met all these other Einstein fellows, spent a year there. My daughter went to school in Virginia. And then I finished up my doctorate. My boss said, hey, I'd like you to keep working on Department of Energy STEM education programs out of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And I was like, Oak Ridge, Tennessee? Um, I knew at that point that there was a national lab there, but I didn't know,
Yep.
a lot about Oak Ridge. And here I have a biracial daughter and everything. And I
Sure.
kind of wondered, like, how would that be in the South and so forth. So we all went down to Oak Ridge and checked it out. And honestly, the people there were fantastic.
Hmm.
The community was fantastic. Great schools, great schools. And so we moved down there. I ended up getting married to another Einstein fellow, and we all moved to Tennessee. And I worked as a STEM education project manager for a while. Worked on different programs with informal education and lots of different things related to STEM education with national agencies. And but I kind of I missed that K-12 thing that I'd been doing for so long, and an opening came available at Oak Ridge Schools, and I thought, well, I'm going to toss my name in the hat and see what happens, and got picked there and had some
Awesome.
promotions along the way. And by the time I left, I was executive director of teaching and learning, which
Congrats.
is, yeah, thanks. And so it was really a great experience. Did my superintendent training in Tennessee. They have a really good superintendent leadership program that you can do there. And then there came a point, my daughter had graduated from high school, and I saw this opening where my family's from, this place that we'd gone back to visit ever since I was, a little girl, the most beautiful place in the country.
I was gonna
And
say I've seen some pictures. I've done a lot of traveling to New Zealand,
yeah,
and it is one. Now I'm biased because I've been to New Zealand, but New Zealand is easily the most beautiful place I have seen.
yeah.
However, these pictures that I have just seen in the Cascade Mountain Range are they definitely give it a run for its money just on the initial look.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And yeah, there are other places that, I could duke it out with,
Oh
but
sure. Well,
that
I
are
mean,
beautiful.
if you're gonna go against somebody, go against New Zealand and their beautiful, that landscape. I mean, it's hard to beat. But I will say, and I'm curious. So I'm seeing this lake, and not to completely divert from what you're doing, but it looks like there's a lake, and it's like this emerald color.
Like Lake Wenatchee, is that what you're looking at?
Maybe that's what it is. But it looks trees all the way down to all the way down to the like everywhere. It looks
There's this
beautiful.
beautiful lake here called Lake Wenatchee. There's a river that runs right through town. It's completely gorgeous here. So even on a hard day, all I have to do is look out the window.
Looks like this one that I'm looking at is Blanca Lake.
Oh, now look for Lake Wenatchee. That's where I'm at.
Okay, I will look it up here. So anyway, back to your story. While I'm looking this up. So now you're back to where you're at now.
Correct.
What are so? I mean, one that's an unbelievable journey and probably a book or a movie in itself. For what you have. So I can see why. So I guess one thing I didn't want to interrupt you in the middle of your story. So for any international listeners listening, if you're not familiar with the term itchy feet, itchy feet is people who they can't stand still. So meaning they can't stay in one place for very long, and they like to move around. And we in my house growing up, we moved a lot. So we moved 17 times the first 18 years of my life. But I think there was also a version of itchy feet in the house. So like we
Right.
would rearrange the furniture every 3 months. Like the living room, you'd walk in and the living room looked completely different. So um, yeah, there was definitely part of that. What is I mean, what is like you traveled and you went and you went from I'm not going to be a teacher, I'm going to be rebellious, and I'm not going to follow what my family is telling me that I have to do, and I'm going to go be my own person. Where does that come from? Right? So like we all so I attribute my self awareness and my rebellious, I guess, mindset due to the circumstances that I grew up in in an abusive home and not so great environment. So it was almost a survival tactic for me, right? It sounds like you had a great family, a great home life, and so I'm curious to where that self-awareness and that rebellious took place. Of Do you think you were born with it, or did you just see some things and you were like, no, I'm gonna be my own person and you guys can love it or leave it?
Well, you're asking some hard questions, and I'll just be really honest with you. I think that sometimes sometimes people have a great home life, but I'll be honest, my father, who's now passed away, so I feel like I can say this, he was a pastor, but he was abusive. And I don't know that I was the one. In fact, I know I wasn't the one who suffered the most from it. I had two siblings who suffered the most from it, but
Gotcha.
he it was very challenging in the sense of, and I think other PKs are preachers' kids, for those who don't know, understand that you're supposed to act a certain way and you're supposed to be a certain way. But if you see your father, the pastor, saying one thing
Mm,
during church and act in a different way at home, it sets up this kind of contradiction and confusion. And so I would actually say that childhood was difficult because there was this distinction between how people thought things were and how things actually were. And just being honest, like there came a point at which, my dad actually broke my foot. And like I said, I can't even complain. I'm not the one who was,
Sure.
the most abused, but I would say that in my family, we were really struggling with this disconnect between what people think we are and what people what we actually are. And I think for me, I really wanted to be genuine. I think being genuine matters to me a lot.
100%.
It matters a lot to me. And it's really important to me in my job that I have that I can be genuine. And maybe a little bit because of that, because I feel like sometimes appearances are deceiving.
Well, yeah, and I think so. I apologize for wrongly assuming
No, it's
about
okay.
but I also do appreciate you being candid and sharing those things. And I will relate to you and say that so authenticity for me, I preach about it. Well, I preach. I'm not a preacher, but I talk a lot about authenticity is the differentiating factor in life, right? You can be whoever you're going to be, just be that, like whatever you are. And authenticity, it is the name of the game. And I will say from my own experiences, and that's why I'm so honest and transparent about my life. I mean, you and I, this is our first time meeting and talking and off air, and I shared with you, these things about my childhood and my life, because it you learn when you're actually able to get it out and you're actually just forward with it. It no longer like has the same impact or hold on you. So I can see where in your role, especially in education, being authentic, essentially what you're doing with those kids or even some of your staff, I'm sure at times, who are going through some things, being authentic allows them to see you as a real person and see you as a real human and say, oh, wait a second, this is a safe place and I can share with you because you're sharing with me, or you're being real with me and I can be real with you. And I think that's I think I'll be honest. Out of all the things that so far that I've picked up from you, I have more respect for that, because of how, and I know what the value is in that, even from a leader, even from a leader. So I would imagine that also plays a part in how you lead the teachers and such and the staff that you serve as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it's really important to be yourself and to be genuine and but also to be empathetic and kind of understand as best as you can, walking in somebody else's shoes a little bit. And like you said, connecting your story to other people's stories, I think it really helps. And in leadership, a lot of times it's about that relationship. And how can I establish a relationship with you if I'm being fake?
Sure.
Like being fake does not establish a relationship. It's really about being genuine. And so being genuine matters a lot to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and you talked about and I'll hit on this and we'll kind of move forward. But you talked about having growing up and you're almost living two lives, right? Like in the public, you're living one. That becomes harder than anything, just trying to keep up a certain persona and perception. Because I dealt with it. My dad ended up going into teaching, and even still up until here recently, I did not divulge everything publicly, just because I thought I had to give him grace, in that, because he was a teacher. But then you actually realize I'm hurting myself, not actually helping anybody else. So let me ask you this: you've made that transition now, what are education obviously has a spotlight on it like never before, and some good, some bad. And so, what do you do? Because I know how hard, my wife being a middle school special education teacher, I know how hard these teachers are working.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you're trying to help maybe the community understand, but also at the same time reinforce with your staff that you have their back, your support. We know what you're going through here.
Well, those are really good questions. So one of the things that I think I bring is just calm. So I have this thing like stay calm, period, calm. And it seems like a small thing, but it's not a small thing because things are scary. And so when you're in a situation where things are scary and there's information coming from all sides and you don't really know what's true and what's not true, it's really important to have a sense of calm and a sense of we can link arms together and we can get through this. So that kind of solutions oriented mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what I consider myself for the staff is a big old filter. Have you seen those filters where you take like, dirty water and then you have like big rocks, then you have
Yeah.
gravel, and then
Yep.
you have that filter. So I'm getting all of this stuff, all this dirty water that pours through the filter. And then I have to get through that and kind of get through it in order to communicate the essence of what needs to be communicated. I can take the dirty water for the staff. I can take that. They don't have to worry about that. They need to worry about what they're doing with their students. So they don't need to be bombarded by all of the dirty water. So I feel like part of my job is really that kind of sense of filtering and making sense of all of the things that are coming left and right and front and center. So yeah, so I'm a filter and then I'm a communicator in a calm way. And I would say that I serve that purpose for staff, but also to the community to try to help them understand what is actually going on. You know, I had a really great conversation once with the local health district, and they were talking about all these things about, public health and the coronavirus and da da da, and all these different things. And they said something pretty powerful, I thought, which was, we're the public health experts. We're the doctors. We're the epidemiologists. That's our job. You are the educators. And I thought, that's right. We're the educators. We're the ones who can best communicate. Wear the darn mask,
Yep.
wear your
Yep.
mask.
Yep.
We can educate. We can help people understand. And but I'm not a public health expert. As much as I feel like I'm earning a minor in public health through this entire thing.
I think all of us are.
Yeah. Um, I can count on them to answer some of those questions, but they count on me and us to educate. And so that really helped me a lot, just kind of frame that like, so I feel that very importantly, not only with staff, but to the community to help them understand how are decisions being made, what can we do as a community to get us to the next get us to the next level, all of those different things. I think communicating, filtering, and learning are some of the things that I can do. And as always, staying calm, period.
I like that. I like that mentality, and it sounds like you also kind of operate. And I could be totally wrong in my assumption in this, but it sounds like you operate in a very servant way. Like you feel like it's your responsibility. Because I felt like that growing and building my business. I never I hated the word employees. I hated the word boss. It's horrible to hear. For me, I always felt like I'm working for you, not the other way around. It's my job to make sure I provide you with the best possible environment that I can provide you with.
Oh, absolutely. I think, we're support staff. So what the key operation that's happening is the work between the teacher and the student. And so I am in my role, I'm there to support it. And I feel like education is like a prism. So every side of that prism matters. All of those things need to operate together in order to make that beautiful rainbow, right? So I have a piece of that prism that needs to be done and needs to be done well, but I'm not the most important part. We all matter. And we all have an important role to play. So I absolutely do feel that I am a support and that my job is to help things run smoothly, run well, run coherently. Um, and that's what I'm here to do.
What have you learned anything about yourself over the last 6 7 months that you didn't know?
Hmm. That's a really good question because a lot of times I feel like I always connect back to Africa. So, like,
That was where one of my next question was going to go. If anything you learned in your experiences over there that you've been able to use and translate into these times.
all the time. So, one of the things that I went through is that when I lived in Africa, that was kind of the height of the AIDS epidemic in
Hmm.
Africa. And I was the primary caregiver for my former sister in law as she was dying of AIDS. Um, and she was an amazing woman. She had a master's degree in law, and she was like an auditor for the government. And she got HIV from her husband. And she was just the most amazing woman and helped me so many times. I actually named my daughter after her.
Awesome.
My daughter carries her name, her middle name is Solange after her. And caring for her and knowing, I probably knew 20 people who died of AIDS, but being a part of that epidemic in Africa and seeing it firsthand and kind of going through those stages of, oh, this isn't real.
Yeah.
This isn't real. This is a bunch of hocus pocus. Or then, conspiracy theories.
The,
Oh, this is just what white people are saying so
yeah.
that black people won't have babies.
Yeah.
Oh, so and so has it, so and so doesn't. How come they have it and they don't have it? All of those questioning, and then watching people die and people that you know and you love. And then this kind of acceptance like, okay, this is real. What do we need to do? And then seeing the treatments that come that kind of help people live if they do become HIV positive. That whole cycle of the epidemic and how it gets handled. I've lived through that already.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when this started, I took it serious. At first, I was kind of like, oh, it's just the flu, just like everybody else
Sure.
did.
Sure.
But I attended a webinar by the Washington State Department of Health in February. It was mid-February or something like that. And that was the point at which they said your schools could get shut down. And when I heard that in February, I thought, oh, this is real. Like, we need to take this seriously. And so we started our disinfection processes, like enhanced disinfection, in February of 2020. I think really, right in the first wave. And I just feel blessed in a way that I've been through an epidemic before.
Well, yeah,
And
yes.
so
I mean, I guess if you can, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
awesome.
in the sense that I'm like, okay, I see the stage we're at right now, and I can see where we're going, and it's very encouraging to me in that way, in that I don't get completely discouraged by the stage we're at because I can see the horizon, and so that helps me a lot. Um, I would just say, as far as what I've learned about myself recently, I was a first year superintendent when this all happened.
Yeah.
And I had moved from across the country, so I was getting used to Washington state rules and regulations as compared to the state of Tennessee. And, there's this kind of newbie feeling like I'm a first year soup. And then this, you know, pandemic hits. And and you know what? It just wipes that I'm green sense just right away, because you could be a superintendent for 17 years and you're really not in any better situation
Well,
than a brand new
so
soup.
so that's what I was going to say. Really, the moment school shut down, you're now all on this. It's now an even playing field. Nobody's dealt with what we're doing. Nobody's had
No.
to deal with it. So you're all kind of learning together. So it does it levels that playing field.
Hmm.
But you had an advantage. You have and I can only imagine the similarities, because hearing you talk about it, even down to the HIV and AIDS epidemic, of how it's passed, right? Like this whole
That's right.
misinformation of, don't
Exactly.
touch me because you'll get it, and these different things, very similar to what we've dealt with COVID. It's wild how that it has to be something within human nature to do this. Like it has to be, I don't know, it's crazy. But
It's like the stages of grief, that denial. And, what does denial turn into? Sometimes it turns into misinformation.
yeah,
And like I said, I have to be the filter on that and go, okay, what's real, what's not real, based upon the best that we know right now. And that's been hard, I think, for people to navigate because we keep learning. So we know more about it now in October than we did in March. And that's just the truth of it.
sure.
So have being able to communicate what we know now is really important, and kind of bringing people along in that journey without overwhelming everybody with all of the misinformation.
Well,
It's
you've got to people don't you got to love it's even the thought process of, oh well, our numbers are going down now from, we'll call it people who didn't necessarily agree with masks, right? Well, they're going down because people are wearing masks, and we're not like we're that's why we're the number, like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's why this is the case, not because it's not severe and not because it's not something we should take serious. So I would imagine has your community leaned on you or been open because you've been through this. And I don't know how much of it you shared about your experience going back to there, but if not, they should be blessed to have you because you lived in an environment as you were. I mean, you were new and you were green going into that environment, right? And then you dealt with that, and then so you're green, but you're not green. You're very more seasoned than you're giving yourself credit for.
well, that's I think what I learned, right? Is that I was kind of maybe being a little hard on myself. And then I saw this thing happen and I went, well, we're all in the same boat. And honestly, the group of superintendents in North Central Washington are just phenomenal. And so we all lean on each other. So
Awesome.
we call each other up and go, here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? And it's really, really helpful. But as far as are people really aware? I would say the school district is aware. I send out weekly newsletters, and so I've talked to them about the lessons I learned in Africa and how that connects to now. And so I would say the staff is aware. I don't know if the communities really are. People are still getting to know me a little bit.
Sure.
Hmm.
Well, we'll help with that. We'll help with that. We'll help with that. So so let me ask you this, because I'm gonna kind of switch, because there are going to be some leaders who are going to listen to this, and teachers who end up becoming leaders and becoming superintendents and becoming, administration. I know from experience of building a business and traveling the world and, growing a company and all these things, that very rarely in the position that you're in, anybody is walking up to you and saying, I'm going to look at you as a real person. And Tracey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you there? So how have you navigated that? Have you had a support system? Are there certain things that you do? Do you meditate? Do you yoga? What are you doing to kind of help with the mental aspect of, because there's not enough. I don't like. So you used the word empathy. I think empathy probably is, with everything we've got going on, from the racial injustice to the COVID to everything. Empathy is probably the word of 2020, right? If we would just have some empathy for our fellow neighbor, right? Like that is it. So there's not enough, because we look at anybody in a high level of power or status, right? Celebrity, athlete, superintendent. Sometimes it's like, oh, like you're scary, or I'm not gonna. Oh, there they are in the grocery store. Don't say anything to her. Be good. Don't act crazy. She might recognize you from your class. These things, right? But you're real. You're a real human being. Like this is what it is, and we're not necessarily perceived that way. Um. So therefore, you don't get the same compassion. Should you have to be able to deal with more stress? Yes, that comes with the role, that comes with the responsibility, but you're still human. So I'm curious how you have experienced that in especially being back here in America, where I'm sure things are everybody has way more of an opinion about things and all these different things. So how have you dealt with being a leader, and what's kind of gotten you through this? Because you're also a parent, you've got family, you've got loved ones, you've got people you're worried about, you've got friends. So how have you dealt with that?
It's funny you bring up the parent part because through this whole thing, my daughter's been finishing her time in the Marine Corps, and that has been
A
a
nervous
huge
wreck,
thing.
I bet.
Yeah, it's been huge. So I would say two things. One is, and this is for all the prospective superintendents out there, and I'm also talking to some ladies and some people of color who might be like, I don't know if I want to be a superintendent. Um, there's an advantage to going to a rural area. And I think that rural areas kind of get the short end of the stick sometimes about what people are thinking about. Rural areas, what's great about it is not only do you get to know other people individually, they get to know you. And so I would say one of the greatest helps for me is living where I live because in this area in Leavenworth, Plain, Peshastin, Dryden, the communities that I serve, people get to know me individually. They see me walking my dog, they see me hiking on the trail in the most beautiful mountains in the world.
Ah, yeah.
But it helps to be seen as an individual. And I do feel like that happens a lot in rural areas. So I do encourage people think about rural areas. Don't only think about working in a city. Working and serving in a rural area can be very rewarding in that way. A second thing I'd like to say is I'm not really good at this about this balance. I feel like I serve, I serve, I serve, I serve, and I have to remind myself to recharge. And that is actually something that's really hard for me. So I don't know that I have great skills in that area, to be honest. I mean, I do try to go hiking regularly, and we walk the dog every day. And I'm actually trying to put like an exercise center in my house now, and I try my best to do some of that. But there are times that I feel like I have a 18 wheeler parked on my back, and I'm not going to lie, that's challenging. That's challenging. And that's something that I have to learn and grow with as a superintendent. And I don't underestimate the challenge with that, but it can be really, really challenging. Um, and I don't think that I am necessarily great at that. That might be one of my weaker areas.
Well, I appreciate the humility. And I, so in relation to, I can understand it. So for those who've never actually been in a leadership position, um, a, there's a double-edged sword to being a leader. And what I have learned in talking to a lot of leaders, I actually, and by the time this comes out, I've got another podcast that I'm launching with the he's the former VP of talent and the first ever head of HR for LinkedIn. So he and I are going to be doing a podcast talking to leaders and culture and these different things. And what I learn about um, leaders is one of the downsides of being a leader is you actually care so much that internally you never feel like you're doing enough, and you never feel like there's not enough, that there's always more that can be done, because the reality of it is you could walk into your office and sit down, and from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. there is something for you to do 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that gets lost, right? That gets lost. I'm sure it gets lost sometimes with your staff. I'm sure it gets lost sometimes with your parents. I'm sure it gets lost sometimes with your family, and I can relate to a lot of that. So I appreciate your humility in doing that. And I went through it for the last year. I had CCR. I was sleeping every other day, about 5 hours at a time, traveling out of the country 160 some days. So it was just, but you always feel like you find an extra gear, right? That one more cup of coffee will get me through it, right? Or one more cup of tea. So I think it's awesome, and I do appreciate your humility with it. I can't stress that enough, because you're showing you know, you're showing a side that I don't think a lot of people get to see for people in your position. So I appreciate that. What is if I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll start to wrap it up because I know you've got other things you'd rather be doing than sitting and talking to me. So, um, what is if you could pick the phone up and you could call yourself way back in 1993, I believe it is,
Mm.
and say, "Hey, you're about to take this journey, and here's what I want to share with you about what's about to happen, and here's what I want you to know." What would you share?
You are going to meet and the most incredible person in your whole life, and that will be your daughter. Um, because I haven't really talked in this podcast about what it's like to be her mother
Mm-hmm.
and to be the mother of a multiracial, multi-ethnic child. But being her mother has grown me in so many ways. And I wouldn't replace that for the entire world. I would also say to myself, oh, I didn't even bring this up, like tying into leadership.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good lesson, by the way, for anybody out there who's interested in being a leader. It is not just an okay thing, but it is a great thing to be type A minus. Go for type A minus. You know, that type A thing, yeah, it'll get you your grades, it'll get your diploma, it'll get you those things. But aim for type A minus. Throw in some flexibility, throw in some versatility, throw in some, you know, being a little more laid back, and life will be a lot more interesting. So I would say you 22-year-old little Miss Magna Cum Laude, you're about to learn that you don't know much. You don't know much, and that's okay. And you can be a type A minus, and being a type A minus and understanding that everything that you know is the tiniest sliver of all there is to know, that's going to make you a better person, and it's going to make you a better worker. It's going to make you a better mother, and it's going to make you a better leader.
That's
That's what I
awesome.
would tell myself.
That's
You,
awesome.
you don't know much.
Yeah, well, I think yeah, we. It's funny you say that because I think that's we're all at that place when we go through life. I had two kids by the time I was 23, and kind of looking back, even now, still then it's looking back, it's like, well, you didn't know squat. Like you think you know.
You think you know something.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's kind of like I had a friend of mine who recently found out they have a child on the way, and they're in their 30s. It's their first one, and he's like, "Man, I don't like. Do you have any advice?" I was like, "I'm not giving you any advice." He's like, "Man, you've got 5 kids. Like, you got to give me something, man. Like, tell me like what." I was like, "Only advice I'm going to give you is I'm going to be here." In the middle of the night when I'm up working, if you just hit me and I'll be here to talk to you because you're going to be up a lot. He's like, well, everybody's coming to us and they're giving me all this advice and these. I was like, listen, I could literally write you a manual, and there is nothing in that manual that is going to be able to direct you and help you have to deal with what's going to happen. You just have to live it. You have to experience it. And I'll never forget. And it's talking about not knowing anything. And this is I don't know why this is where my brain goes, but I remember that day at 21, and we had my daughter, and we're leaving the hospital, and you take her out, and then they were like, well, we can help with the car seat, and I was like, yeah, that would be a good idea. And they put him in the car seat, and you start to pull off, and then all of a sudden it hits you, and you're like, oh crap, like uh they're letting us leave with this human, like what, like are you sit like I don't even know what to do, and you go home and you just sit there. The TV didn't come on, like you like don't nobody make a noise, like we're sleeping, like, and it's like, what do we do? and you think you know, but you don't know. So we're gonna wrap this up. Typically, how I wrap it up is I ask two personal questions. We've definitely got into some personal stuff, so I'm gonna keep them lighthearted and fun. And then I have been on your side of the interview a lot, and I've gotten some feedback from some of the people we've done interviews with, and they've asked Shane, like, I had questions I wanted to ask you, maybe tie that in. So I'm actually going to allow you at the very end to ask me a question before we wrap it up. So um, my first question is have you been able, I'm sure you have, you spent enough time over there, but I'll ask anyway. Is there a food from Africa when you were there that's hard to find here, but you've been able to kind, or you haven't been, you wish you could, or you've been able to try and replicate it and somehow tried to figure it out?
Oh my gosh, my favorite food over there is called fufu with dungo dungo. Oh my god, this stuff's amazing. And it's I don't fufu is kind of like this grain. I mean, the closest I can say is mashed potatoes, but
Yeah.
that's far from the truth. But oh, by the way, you have great West African food. Where are you in Louisville?
So I'm about 30 minutes south. So you've been to Louisville?
So the thing about Kentucky, okay, so West African food's hard to come by. I'm just
Yes.
letting you know.
Yes.
There's a lot of East African food in America, but West African food's hard to come by. So me, I'm always keeping my eye out for West African food. And Kentucky has it both in Louisville and in Lexington. Super bizarre. But you are so fortunate to have West African food right in your town. I'm very jealous of that because I don't have it here. But anyhow, fufu is it's not mashed potatoes, but I'm just trying to give you a somewhat equivalent sense of what that's like. And then the dungo dungo is this kind of slimy gumbo stuff with fish, and it's amazing. It is so delicious. And I struggle to find it. There's this great place in Atlanta called the Nations Cafe.
Yep.
That stuff, it's got it. I love it. Every time I was near Atlanta, I would go by the
I'm gonna
Nations
have to go.
Cafe.
I've got some family down there, so next time I'm down, I'm
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go try it.
yeah, yeah. You got to walk in and you got to go, no, I want the menu for Africans.
Okay.
Yeah, they have two menus and they're going to give you one kind of menu and you need to ask for the other one.
Yeah. So in Louisville, a lot of people don't know Louisville is actually one of the top culinary cities in the country, and we have there's a lot of different ethnicities from a food standpoint here. There's even a lady, and I'm not for sure. I know she's from Africa, and I'm not for sure where she's from, but in Louisville, she is known as the Cookie Lady, and I think it's Casito cookies, and she started making these cookies and then packaging them up and then going and selling them at events or parades and those kind of things. And she's turned this thing into a company to where she services they sell them at the professional baseball stadium, they sell them at at the concerts, at the Yum Center, at like everything. And she'll show up sometimes and she'll have the bowl on her head, and she's walking around and she's serving and she's doing like it is and they are amazing. They are easily some of the best cookies that you'll ever have in your life. It is she's known as the Cookie Lady, and there's a bunch of news articles um and stuff out there, so it's really really interesting. So
Well,
uh,
I have to give a shout out to a restaurant in Kentucky, and I honestly can't remember if it's Lexington or Louisville, so I'm just going to be honest. But
okay.
it's called Savs, S-A-V apostrophe S, Savs, and I believe they had a fire a while back, and then the community came together to help them rebuild. That place has some good food. And so either Lexington or Louisville, can't remember, but Savs, I have to give them credit.
Salves.
Savs. Maybe it's
Salves.
Lexington, but I can't remember.
Savs Catering, Savs Hospitality Group. Looks like okay. Yep, yep, yep. We have a lot of those things here. It looks like yep, yep. I see it. So yeah, so we have a lot of different things in the food here. The bourbon industry is a big driver with that right now because there's so much money coming in, and what a lot of people don't know is so many different countries around the world love Kentucky bourbon. So it's a big part of our tourism and those things here. So
Interesting. Yep.
if you're ever back over this way, absolutely hit me up, and you're more than welcome. You can meet the family, and we could take you around, and we could find some East African food for sure, or West African food.
West Africa.
We can find some West African food for sure. So,
That'd be
uh,
great.
so my next question will be, if you can recommend one book to educators out there, and it doesn't have to be one. If you've got a couple, you're like, Shane, I got to tell you a couple.
Well,
What would it be?
well, I think in general, I'm going to walk over. There's this
Totally
book that
okay.
I've really been enjoying lately, and it's not just for educators, but for leaders, and it's The Power of Positive Leadership.
Okay.
I'm
Awesome.
trying to get it on the
I
screen,
see it. Yep.
by John Gordon, and I think that is a great book. Partially because what I like about what John Gordon says, it's not that you don't acknowledge that things can be hard. It's not that you're saying everything's perfect, but you have to kind of find a positive path even when things are challenging. And so I love John Gordon's philosophy. So I recommend that one. And then for any people who are just up for a challenge in life, a book, the author, I'm blanking on it right now, but Feel the Fear but Do It Anyway. It's kind of a short book, easy read, but I definitely have taken that philosophy in my life. Like, just because I do something hard doesn't mean that I thought, oh, I might be afraid of doing it. But you know what? I'm going to do it anyway,
Yeah.
because that's how we stretch. So feel the fear, but do it anyway. And then positive leadership.
Susan Jeffers.
Susan Jeffers.
Yeah,
Exactly.
is
Great
who
book.
did that. So when we post this, I'll put the links to those books down below as
Great.
your recommendation. So before we wrap it up, I'm going to turn the stage over to you, and you can ask me a question about anything. It can be about the podcast. It can be about my journey. It can be about literally anything. So I'll let you have the stage.
Well, I'm just curious, Shane. I think this is a really neat premise, and I think it's exciting that you're talking to educators. And like I said, I've looked at some and listened to some, and I think you're getting a pretty wide variety of perspectives. And I'm curious, what are you learning from this as a whole, and how are you taking that into your future?
Um, so I think what I'm learning is it's almost like it's probably more reaffirmation than it is learning, because I've had the unique ability. I love your perspective, first of all, on life and on the world. And when you travel internationally, it does that. It opens your mind to seeing things much different than if you just live in your own bubble and where you grew up and those things. So what I'm seeing is educators they're superheroes. First of all, um, they definitely bend; they don't break, and that's okay. And really, what am I taking out of this? I'll be honest, that it's that reaffirmation piece again of it's a scary thing to be, an entrepreneur. I can grow a business. I can go out. I can make a whole bunch of money. I can, provide for my family. I can do these things. But when I really found my passion in being in front of people and speaking to leadership teams in corporate, environments, or educators or what have you, when I found that to be my passion, it's a bit uneasy because it's not the same amount of money. It's not, these different things. And it's all of a sudden I'm going to go do this. Like, I'll be honest, it's more affirmation because I can't go get a degree. I'm not going to go to college. I can't sit in front of a book. I can't. It's going to be a way for me to share my journey and my experiences and tie it in from an educational place to be able to help provide and add to what you guys already do, in a way, and or help teachers who are in it. And I mean, I've talked to some teachers and they don't know my past. So, one of the first things that comes up, well, these kids, they're this, they're driving me crazy. And I let them talk. And I said, okay, well, let me share with you and let me see if I can give you some insight. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on, and let me give you some things to maybe try with this mindset. So I think that's what it is in a lot of ways. It's like even though it's tough times and nobody can do speaking engagements right now, and you can't really be in person, and there's a lot of uncertainty. It's in a weird way, it's like this is exactly what I should be doing. This is because I love meeting new people. If it weren't for me trying to do this, you and I never would have connected. And I hope we stay connected. It's one of those things where it's hearing your story and your outlook. And I don't know. Did you see? I can't remember the episode. Did you see Colonel Fred Johnson's
I
episode?
did. I
Like
did.
it's like people like that you never would have come across. And this guy's a retired Army colonel for 30 years, and now he's teaching. And I don't know if you're in our Facebook group, but he's pretty active in our Facebook group, and he's sharing. These kids are teaching him about anime,
Uh-huh.
and he's tying it into his stuff and virtual, and he's talking about these different characters he's learning, and he's like, Shane, I never would have ever thought I would ever. He's like, and some of it's actually pretty interesting. He's like, it's actually pretty cool. So
Yeah.
I guess that for me is what it is. It's a reaffirmation that while sometimes the public may swing a perception that K through 12 education is, you know, lazy or self-righteous or all these different things, it's none of that. It is a mixture of a whole bunch of people with crazy different backgrounds, and they all really, for the most part, have one mission, and that is to do everything they can to help put our world and our society in a better place and hand it off to the next generation. And that's really what you do. You guys are all humble. Even when you're not humble, you're still being humble because there's not enough appreciation to be able to be said for what's being done. And it's just like in your community. I don't know you. We're just getting to know each other. I didn't know you before this. We randomly connected on LinkedIn. But for your community to have someone like you with your mindset and your humility and your transparency and your authenticity, they are blessed beyond belief, because I have seen the opposite from people in your role. And I can tell you that um, if I were to show my wife what it looks like where you live and where you teach, I'm afraid she may say, "Hey Shane, does she have any middle school special ed jobs open? Because I'd like to go there and hike and walk the dog and do that all day." So I'd be more than, as a dad and having experienced it, I would be more than comfortable having my kids grow up in an environment and in a community where you're leading that education world. So I thank you on behalf of those people who do feel that way, and on behalf of those people who don't feel that way and they should. I thank you for what you do and how you go about doing it.
Well, thanks for your kindness, and you and your wife and your family are welcome anytime. This is a great place to raise kids, and
Well,
you
she's gonna
know,
watch this, and she might.
it's
So
a
if I
great. By the way, we have a great deal in that kids who do well in school, they get free ski passes, and we teach our kids how to ski. Um, I mean, not every district can say that, so
can
come
we
on out.
can I tube and not ski? Do they have tubing?
Yes, we have tubing.
Oh,
We
okay.
have
All right. Because
snowshoeing. We have. I mean, I
I'm
have to
6 foot
say,
6, and so
I
I'm my center of gravity is not where everybody else's is, and
I have to tell you, I have to have a growth mindset about myself about skiing, because I am probably the worst skier in the entire region. Um,
if
but
I
I
moved
like
there,
to
if I moved
snowshoe.
there, I would unseat you in that, because yeah.
I like to snowshoe, and I'm kind of, getting talked into at least trying to figure out how to do the cross country skiing thing. I don't know. It's kind of hard, but we all of our kids know how to do it. They do it during PE. I mean, you go into our PE classrooms and we've got racks of skis lined up. Like, not kidding.
They ski in PE.
Yes, sir. Come on
What?
out.
Oh man. Oh, if my yeah, I've got to somehow keep this episode from getting in front of my family, because I got a feeling you very well may get a message and say, "Hey, you mentioned." I'm just letting you know. So, man, that's awesome. So, just a quick question before you go: how much snow on a typical day when it does snow? What kind of snow in inches do you guys get, or do you get feet, or
Well, there will be feet on the ground. So
it
it
just?
starts off kind of small. And coming from Tennessee, it was a little intimidating.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But there comes a point at which there's a couple feet of snow. But it's amazing. The people here are amazing. and the road crews are amazing. So, in fact, this school district hardly ever has a snow day.
Well, as you
Hardly
know
ever.
from being down this way, if even it might snow,
Oh, I know.
we might
I
just need
know.
to shut things
I
down
know.
because we might get an inch of snow, so we need to shut it down.
I know it's very very different, but here they are road crews are amazing. So we rarely close school for snow because the road crews go out and they do what needs to be done.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Dr. Beckendorf-Edou, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you waking up every day and accepting the challenges that come your way in the education world. And I'm truly, truly honored to be connected and get to know you. Thank you.
I and likewise, thank you very much for lifting up the experiences of educators across this country and the world. I think we need people like you. Educators, we don't naturally do that, and so we need people sometimes to help that become evident because teachers and educators of all kinds, like we care so much about kids, and that is why we get up every day. So thank you for highlighting that, and thanks for letting me be a small piece of that. I've really enjoyed my time with you, getting to know you, and I would love to stay connected.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of the day and last part of the week, and enjoy what I'm sure is probably some beautiful scenery and beautiful weather coming your way this weekend.
You too. You
All right.
take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.